Look, originally, I created this video just to talk about how fine Eddie Murphy was in Vampire in Brooklyn, yet here we are. Hi, I'm Pyrus, and I have a ton of niche interests that those closest to me are tired of hearing about, so I created an entire series on YouTube for the sole purpose of discussion. Intros out of the way, today we're going to be talking about why black vampires just don't work. Vampire in Brooklyn is a 1995 vampire film that is largely accepted as a comedy. The film stars Eddie Murphy and Angela Bassett, two of the most notable names in cinema, especially in the 90s. Murphy, being known for his comedy, was at a bit of a crossroads in his career, where on one end, he knew comedy was working for him, and so did studio executives. Then there's the other end, the urge to branch out and try something new. Vampire in Brooklyn is a result of that desire. Murphy plays a vampire named Maximilian, who was forced to flee from the Caribbean after being discovered by the hunters. Again. This time he has a bit of a dilemma, as the hunters were nearly successful, and he is now the last of his kind. Set on a mission by a fellow vampire, Max must journey to the land of dreams, desolation, and discovery, Brooklyn, New York, to find an unawakened half-vampire in an effort to rebuild the vampire empire. That's a crazy word. That's crazy to say. This film is captivating, and those who have seen this cult classic may laugh at me, but I find this film to be an enchanting goth vampire romance that never was. Angela Bassett, who plays Rita, the aforementioned half-vampire, is mesmerizing, and her performance displaying the vulnerability of a woman slipping into madness and clinging to her humanity is moving.
This is we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Help me!
Murphy as Max plays a role free from comedy in this film, which is a departure from his filmography. Maximilian is suave, charismatic, seductive. He's fine as I don't know why people were so mad at the wig. They were focused on the wrong thing, if I'm being honest. Max wouldn't have to tell me twice about spending an eternity with him. My love for this film runs deep, but when I find myself rewatching it, the love runs cold at the disappointment of what could have been. This film, despite its well thought out shots, attempts at introducing a new vampire trope, and stellar acting, is at odds with itself because of a huge identity crisis in the film. Is this a comedy or a horror? Vampire in Brooklyn is not regarded for what I discussed above. I tend to get hung up on beauty and story, whereas the majority of the admiration for this film comes from the comedy. The film does not miss a beat in terms of trying to coax its viewers to laugh. It's egregious. There are segments of this film that would be downright horrifying until you unmute and hear what the actors are saying. I think Wes Craven, the director of this film, had not yet come to an understanding when comedic elements were unnecessary. Because if we're being real, he's a horror director. The film feels so disjointed as a result of two major entities on set at odds in terms of direction: Craven and the film's star, Eddie Murphy. Craven and the studios wanted this film to be a straight-up comedy, whereas Murphy wanted the film to be more serious, and similar to Craven's previous body of work, The Serpent and the Rainbow. The disconnection bleeds through Murphy's performance. Max is deadly serious throughout the entire film, a compromise Murphy gladly did not make, as his performance is one of my favorite parts of the film. I cannot imagine this film being more over the top than it already is, especially with Preacher Polly, and the existence of Guido, both played by Eddie Murphy. These two characters were entirely unnecessary to the film, with Guido only being utilized to discover Rita's favorite food. I'm glad Murphy stood his ground with this decision, because as a young girl, I was so happy to see a black vampire, and when I saw Angela Bassett as a vampire, I was literally over the moon. The Hex Girls were pretty much the only representation I had of female vampires, and we got lucky that we even got a tan one. Representation is important, and seeing a serious vampire on screen instead of one played up for laughs really shaped how I interact with literature, media, and my own writing. Now this is where I kind of veer off on a tangent. As my qualms with this film are a lot larger than I initially thought, why are we always laughing? And when we're not laughing, we're made to laugh even when we want to be serious. This film was regarded by critics at the time as Murphy's worst film, with many clowning him for the wig and notably calling him a falling star.
Look, children, it's a falling star. Make a wish. Yeah, yes. That's right.
When he was truly breaking the status quo and doing something remarkable. Why do we only get representation when it's funny? Why do we have to settle for comedy and grasp at straws to formulate a better narrative? I think what Murphy was doing here was interesting in creating a new type of vampire, one that hails from the Caribbean instead of the tired norm of Transylvania or somewhere in Europe. This branch of vampirism led me to the conclusion that there is uncharted territory when it comes to the vampire genre. I think it's a genre, right? What could be rich fantasy stories, horror flicks, or romance is stifled because racism kills creativity. Today, I will discuss why black vampires just don't work. And yes, that includes everyone's favorite, sinners. If we're discussing black vampires, it only felt right to discuss the first rendition of a black vampire in the 1972 film Blacula. Mama Walde is a prince from Africa in the 18th century who, with his beautiful wife Luva, journeyed to Transylvania in hopes of recruiting Count Dracula, of all people, in their efforts to stop the slave trade. The meeting turns sour when Dracula begins to make inappropriate remarks about Luva, implying that he wants to enslave her. Mama Walde, outraged by this offense, defends his wife, and I mean he defends her. And attempts to depart. Dracula uses his thralls to seize the two and curses Mama Walde with vampirism and the name Blacula as punishment.
You shall be Blacula.
Luva is held captive in her husband's tomb and is presumed to have succumbed to starvation. The remainder of the film follows an awakened Mama Walde as he both navigates the 1970s and seeks to win the favor of Tina, a modern woman whom he believes is the reincarnation of Luva. Blacula was not what I expected at all. I watched it as this video went off the rails and I expected horribly offensive humor and a lot of racism. What I found instead was a tragedy about a man forced to become his maker or master. Unfortunately, this film is one of the most early examples of blaxploitation, a term coined by the NAACP. Blaxploitation films were genre films made usually in the 1970s that largely featured black actors that were aimed towards black audiences. American International Pictures was going broke and sought to make a black vampire movie to rake in some quick cash. This film was never meant to be a box office hit. It was made to be a mockery, a quick money grab before the curtain closed on the studios. The original script for Blacula was titled Count Brown's in Town and was said to be full of a lot of shucking and jiving. The reason this film was and is successful to this day is because of the work and retooling of the script and none other by the film star William Marshall. This film isn't a horror film. It's the tragic tale of a man who sought assistance from a monster who was racist enough to punish Mama Walde and his wife for no true offense. Marshall took a risk asking to make changes to the script to get rid of the shuckin' and jivin' factor and deliver a true black vampire classic. The success of this film is due to Marshall's dedication to being an introduction to black vampires or black people in the horror/supernatural genre. The money that this film rakes in would encourage studios to create more films with black leads. A whirlwind of films started popping up, like the sequel to Blacula, Scream Blacula Scream, or Blackenstein, who was just a black Frankenstein. Mama Walde suffered at the hands of an immortal oppressor, Dracula, and was doomed to live a life in similar fashion of feeding off the innocent. The difference between Dracula and Mama Walde and the true horror that could have been expressed in Blacula is the horror of bodily autonomy versus the horror of power. Think about it. To Dracula, his vampirism was an extension or an amplification of power he could have held organically as a mortal, especially during the 18th century. Vampirism was the most powerful tool in Dracula's tool belt. The ability to control and demand things from others based on no merit but falsehoods of superiority is at the core of Dracula's character, and damn if it doesn't sound like a slave master. Dracula, an assumed dignified man, acted with barbarity in his meeting with Mama Walde and Luva, and his outrage came from being told no. Being told no was enough for an all-powerful man to damn an innocent man and his wife to eternity and death. Knowing this, I ask, is Mama Walde even a shade of the same monster as Dracula? Mama Walde was born out of hate and was forced into bloodlust by Dracula. This difference already creates a new dynamic and relationship with the ailment of vampirism. Mama Walde's transformation is an act of external racist oppression. He was not seeking power for himself, he was seeking an end to the slave trade. He was a righteous man punished for his morality. His monstrosity of vampirism is imposed from the outside by a figure who represents the very evil he was fighting. Mama Walde wasn't a corrupted mortal like Dracula was. He was a colonized body. I think Mama Walde would have had no will to harm others. Truly. But this creates a different film, a different kind of horror. Mama Walde's horror comes from one of a body that is forced to move despite the mind. Think about the clickers from The Last of Us. They are still conscious human beings, yet their flesh moves because of the cordyceps. Seeing Momo Walde struggle with this would have been more horrific, yet this would mean universal audience would have to confront just how wrong it is to have a black man do something against his will. The true horror of Momo Walde's story is not that he wants to feed on you, but that he is a conscious mind trapped in a body compelled to do so against its will. Blacula is a horror of lost autonomy, of being a puppet to a curse you despise. The true tragedy of this film is the glimmer of the human soul still trapped inside of what's seen as a monster. This is the true issue of blaxploitation apart from the obvious. It waters down complexity for the sake of monetary gain and ensuring universal or white audience enjoyment. Rich narratives go untold out of fear of implication. Watching a man struggle against a curse inflicted upon him by a white oppressor, being Dracula, forces the audience to sit with the discomfort of that historical dynamic. It's not a clean, cathartic revenge fantasy. It's a messy, ongoing trauma. The concept of Momo Walde is genius. Marshall was truly onto something, but the execution was forced into a mold that couldn't contain his true tragedy. He was made to be a black Dracula to sell tickets, when his story was inherently, fundamentally, and more interestingly, an anti-Dracula. Momo Walde, as a vampire, just does not work. Blade, at its core, is a film about revenge. While pregnant, Blade's mother was bit by a vampire, resulting in her death and the creation of an abomination. Blade is born a half-vampire, half-human hybrid, known as the Daywalker. He has all the benefits of vampirism, with the only drawback being his need for blood. Blade is a badass vampire hunter dripped out in the coolest gear, and he has the best comebacks.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Yet, in terms of character, the allure of Blade, at least for me, stops there. There's something off about this character. Blade is the film's lead, so you'd expect him to be more than a catalyst for action. Even in emotional scenes like finding his best friend Wesker soon dead after being brutalized, we're given absolutely nothing. Blade lacks for character development in a film where he, a vampire hybrid, is supposed to convey the depth of humanity. Blade severely lacks depth, and I truly think this is because he wasn't written in the 1998 film to be a true representation of a black vampire. Blade was made instead to be marketable. Unfortunately, Blade is a token whose blackness is visually present, so there is an illusion of representation, yet his blackness is narratively irrelevant. Blade views vampirism as something that ultimately must be cured. However, this really isn't addressed or expanded upon apart from his revenge plot. This movie desperately wants you to ignore that Blade is being played by a black man. This creates a character void of culture or personality apart from Blade's, albeit very funny, reactions to the world around him. This film's opening scene is set in the 1960s, meaning Blade was born during the Civil Rights Movement. This, no doubt, would have a major impact on Blade's upbringing, but instead, we have a major time skip to when this man is 30 years old and completely dead in terms of personality. I'm not saying we need to hone in on the Civil Rights era exactly, but I'm saying that growing up in a time of uncertainty, bloodshed, and hope would have a major impact on how Blade would approach the idea of being a vampire hunter. Blade exists in a deracinated world. Deracinated meaning to remove or separate from a native environment or culture, especially to remove the racial or ethnic characteristics or influences from. For the success of studios and the enjoyment of universal audiences, Blade isn't really black. He's a character who just so happens to have a black actor. Blade exists in a race-neutral world, one where his blackness is not a narrative engine, but more of a visual characteristic. If the actor for Blade was replaced by that one white guy, there would be no narrative difference apart from the loss of iconic lines like this. I'm sorry, I can't help it.
Freeze! Motherfucker, are you out of your damn mind?
Deracination is where I believe we are currently in terms of having black characters in media. Creators, showrunners, studios, they want inclusivity, or rather they want to attempt to obtain maximum viewership and get the attention that inclusivity brings. So they add in, for this example, a black character or characters. Think the Valerians from House of the Dragon. Settings like Westeros are said to be post-racial or pre-racial to avoid dealing with the implications of their casting. This creates cognitive dissonance for me me, and I assume many viewers, maybe even you, if you made it this far in this video, when we see this handsome, dark-skinned, established, dressed-down man like Corus Valerian wielding immense power, and our real-world knowledge for how dark-skinned men are treated, even with the accoutrements, here in our own hellish reality, is way back in our minds, screaming at us at all times. It's especially if it's never addressed in the show. This is not to say that dark-skinned men or black people can't wield immense power. It's just that sometimes, especially in the time period, it gets a little. Deracination robs us of experiencing true depth in media and often leads to the horrible misuse of POC characters, often avoiding their historical backgrounds for the sake of the writer's narrative. This is why Blade is so damn boring in terms of story. It may seem like I'm dragging Blade, and I'm not trying to. I had to sit through 2 hours of movie because I forgot how it went, and I was astonished with how my nostalgia hyped up this movie for me. There's really nothing going on apart from straight action and the occasional line from Blade that makes me nod in improvement. It's really funny, which is a shame because beneath the cool that Snipes portrays, at the core of Blade is the potential for a story of rejection, perseverance, and eventually acceptance. Blade is the ultimate outsider as the Daywalker. He is rejected by both worlds. To vampires, he's an abomination, or they want to capture him to steal his power. To humans, he's a monster to be feared or something that is pure myth. He is ultimately feared by both groups, and I imagine that this is incredibly lonely. Blade is a tragic character that is perpetually caught between two worlds, never fully belonging to either, and as fate would have it, is the only person equipped to fight a war for a humanity, a group of people that may never accept him. He is defined by an internal conflict he did not choose. Blade was a success, and it had the potential to prove that Black-led superhero films could be blockbusters. At the same time, studios made the choice to prioritize universal themes over constructive commentary. It would be 20 years before Marvel introduced a black superhero film that did not sacrifice plot over action or coolness. I also believe that Blade's remake cannot make it out of the studios because of the unwillingness to make Blade's race significant to the plot. And I'm not saying that they have to go full on, but they have to at least acknowledge that the dude is black. Blade has more to him than just being cool. Blade as a black vampire does not work. Alright, I'm gonna lay all the debates to rest. Mary was right. I remember when this movie came out, social media was flooded with vitriol for Mary. Many were upset, pinning this character for the discussion of what it means to be a part of the black community and culture. Unfortunately, all productive discussion was halted by a surface level issue, that issue being Mary's skin tone and lineage. Mary acknowledged her privilege and found a way to use this privilege to further her community. She died trying to assist the twins with funding for the juke joint, and upon her being turned into a vampire, she was fixated on the concept of family. The truth is, when it comes to Mary and turning everyone at the juke joint, she was right. Humor me. After Preacher Boy and Smoke eliminated Remick, all of the vampires would have been free from his control. We all know this is possible because in the end credit scene, both Mary and Stack have their senses. In this scenario, more than 2 vampires survive. Perline, Grace, Bo Chow, and more are still in the barn while everything outside is going down. I imagine that Annie either wasn't staked through the heart correctly, or maybe this type of vampire she is resilient to wooden stakes. Maybe it takes railroad spikes. I don't know if you know, you know. Annie awakens, but she is not this bloodthirsty monstrous creature she heard of in legend. She is herself. Perhaps she can use this curse as a gift. The hard work that comes with vampirism would not be uncommon to a root worker. She could be the tether to humanity for these fledgling vampires and use her gifts of conjure. Everyone reconvenes in the juke joint. Everyone's been changed by the night, some mentally and some physically. There's limited time to speak though, as they remember that Remick and the others warned them that the clan planned to wipe them out at the juke joint. They spring a plan. The fledgling vampires need to feed after all. Smoke picks them off strategically, hurting them inside the barn with his shots. The men are confused. While they're inside, the place looks completely abandoned. This is when the vampires spring into action, easily ending the lives of these miserable, racist men, completely draining them to the point of no reanimation. I give you a coven of vampires led by a seasoned root worker. By day, Lisa at the grocery store or unturned coven members go out and promote the juke joint and tend to daytime things like keeping the juke joint functional or bringing ingredients in for Annie to cook, the juke joint becomes a true isolated safe haven in the South, the first of its kind. Little do the daywalkers know that there is an intricate crypt beneath the juke joint dedicated to teaching and dispatching vampires to bring about change in the South. But y'all not hearing me though. Sinners is a vampire movie with like max 10 minutes of screen time for black vampires, and don't quote me on that. I'm just trying to express that we really weren't fed. I enjoy Sinners a lot actually. I even have it on DVD, but black vampires don't work in this film because they weren't given the opportunity to exist fully apart from aggressive bloodlust. It's only at the end where we see Mary and Stack at peace and a seemingly normal couple residing amongst the living that we understand that monster is a mentality, and to put it simply, none of these characters were monsters. The true monsters were coming at them in broad daylight. At their core, they were only sinners because of the labels put on them by a country that sought to demonize them in the first place. Sinners, unfortunately, as far as black vampires go, does not work. Interview with the Vampire is an ANC adaptation of Anne Rice's novel. The show has by far the best representation of black vampires that we have seen to date. The show stars Jacob Anderson as Louis de Pondula, a mentally ill top who has undergone Snow Bunny mind control. I kid. Louis is a closeted Creole black man who was going through some shit, and the show takes us through the retelling of his story as both a mortal and a vampire. Claudia, portrayed by both Bailey Bass and Delaney Hales, is a child vampire who also faces challenges that stem from her environment and race. Claudia is found by Louis in a burning building. In fact, the whole black neighborhood is on fire as a result of a racist mob blindly lashing out over the death or killing of Alderman Fenwick. Claudia is also made to perform a minstrel-esque show when being forced to perform My Baby Loves Windows. Claudia is not performing a piece of genuine artistry. She is forced to perform a parody of black childhood innocence, crafted through an objectifying lens. Her delivery, exaggerated, bright, and artificially cheerful, mirrors the performative glee demanded of black entertainers for white audiences.
There's just one thing that makes her sad. In fact, I think it makes her mad.
Claudia's treatment is also another example of the horror that lies within lacking bodily autonomy. Claudia's body is forced to sing and move in a way that is utterly disconnected from her internal reality. A centuries-old woman trapped in a child's body, being forced to enact a humiliating caricature. The true horror is the dissonance between her internal rage and the grotesque, cheerful performance her body is compelled to give. As a vampire in the 1910s, racism isn't subtle at all. Louis finds himself, an immortal being, having to play polite to appease his white business partners. Louis is a successful black brothel owner in Storyville. This position requires him to use code switching to the extent of pulling a knife on his kin to protect his reputation.
Get on home, else I'll bleed you like a cochon, bruh.
In order to better navigate a world and business partners that both rely on him and resent him at the same time. Lestat, aware of this imbalance, uses this as a way to coax Louis into vampirism.
This primitive country has put you clean. It has shackled you in permanent exile. Every room you enter, every hat you are forced to wear, the stern landlord, the deferential businessman, the loyal son, all these roles you conform to, and none of them your true nature.
He knew that Louis longed for freedom that power provides. It is then that we come to understand that even being an all-powerful vampire means nothing in a world drenched in racism. The struggles and celebration that Louis experienced are what make him the type of vampire and character he is now. And notice how neither are sacrificed in this show. Through Louis, we see the complexity of immortality because of the humanity in Louis. As far as representation goes, Interview with the Vampire is fantastic for expanding on character instead of diminishing both Claudia and Louis for tokenship. Louis and Claudia are black vampires through and through, from the way they talk, from the way they move about the world. Interview with the Vampire's adaptation is a masterclass in writing. They write race in a way that adds richness to the overall story of the project. As far as black vampires go, Interview with the Vampire, it works. Vampire is a concept that has not been fully explored on the big screen. This is mostly because those writing vampires are writing them how they have always been, white. However, in a world with lichens, vampires, and ghouls, the most unrealistic thing anyone would have you believe is that a black vampire living in the 1600s would have the same luxury as a white vampire of that same time period. Colorblind aspect of vampirism just does not work. The foundational tropes of vampirism are racially coded. White vampires, from Dracula to Lestat to Astarion to the Cullens, are seen as the norm, or authentic vampires. These vampires are allowed to move about in a world that has and will always, despite their vampiric affliction, appealed to them. A black vampire from the 1910s would not be able to brood in a luxurious mansion or even be able to safely walk in the night, even with their supernatural abilities and leverage. Allowed to be amoral and capricious and even celebratory in their violence, the white vampire's killing is framed as a natural part of their monstrous existence, their superiority, or their internal struggle. Their prey is often anonymous or conventionally attractive. The white vampire's motives for killing or draining their prey can be as simple as, "I was thirsty." The white vampire is able to use their immortality as a clean slate in each new era. They aren't haunted by the specific systematic traumas of those eras because they were often on the benefiting side to them. They're able to do this because whiteness is the historical default for positions of power and anonymity. A white vampire can be an aristocrat in 1780s France, an industrialist in 1920s New York, a tech bro CEO in 2025 California. Their whiteness allows them to occupy positions of authority, blend into the upper echelons of society in almost any Western era with minimal scrutiny. The black vampire cannot exist with the same blueprint as the white vampire, period. They would be unable to move throughout a period of time in history unnoticed. Instead of living through centuries, many black vampires would have to survive. For a black vampire, immortality isn't an escape from history, it's being forced to live through and remember every brutal chapter of it. They don't get to move on from slavery or segregation. They have a first-hand memory or experience of it. Humanity haunts the black vampire. Their human experience was not one of privilege to be transcended, but one of oppression to be survived. The memory of being treated less than human would make them uniquely unable to view humans as cattle. To do so would be to replicate the logic of their own oppressors. Think of the difference in how Louis and Lestat view killing human beings, for example. Louis feels poorly about killing, as Lestat preys upon them and even teaches Claudia to do the same. Having likely experienced the worst of human cruelty firsthand, vampires would possess a visceral, empathetic understanding of suffering. They know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of indiscriminate power. This makes it so difficult, if not impossible, for them to inflict that same feeling on others for fun. As our differences in culture set us apart from the norm of the origin, I think it's a grand disservice to Black and POC communities that the mere thought of supernatural beings like vampires are not expanded upon. Differences in our culture set us apart from the origin. If you take nothing else from this video, I want you to understand that the only reason we have the widely accepted narrative of vampires being evil, old, hateful, lonely, and decrepit beings is because these narratives are written by... Imagine a badass vampire from the island of Guam defending their home pre-Spanish colonization. I fear that would eat. This isn't only interesting, it also gives us a chance to use fantasy to propose a different outcome. Maybe one where languages and lands are not lost, but protected by supernatural beings. But as usual, I want to know what you think. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. I just want to say, and I also want to say thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate the time you spend here on the channel. It really does mean a lot. If you like this video, please be sure to show some appreciation by liking and engaging. Your support means way more than you know, and I would really love to just make videos and research and study more. It honestly is so much fun to me. It gives me so much joy. Also, check out some of my other videos and be sure to subscribe for future content. I have been Pyrus. I hope you have a wonderful night or day wherever you are. I'm out. Peace.
See ya!